Everyone in that courtroom thought they already knew how the story would end. They saw a quiet woman sitting at the defense table, hands folded, shoulders slightly hunched, wearing a plain dress she'd bought on clearance. And then they saw her husband across the aisle. Confident, polished, expensive suit, expensive lawyer, expensive smile. In their minds, the math was simple. He had money power and the system on his side. She had none of that. They thought she was about to be erased. And honestly, for a long time I thought so too. My name is Claire Morgan, and for 12 years I was married to a man who liked to remind me how lucky I was to have him. Lucky he picked me. Lucky he provided. Lucky he tolerated my simple life. We met when he was nothing but potential and caffeine, sleeping on a futon and talking about ideas that never seemed to end. I worked mornings at a bakery and nights at a diner, paid the rent, paid the internet bill, paid for the laptop he used to build his company. When our son Noah was born, I stayed home because one of us had to, and according to him, my career was always flexible. You know what I mean. Years passed. His company grew. The house got bigger. The distance between us did too. He stopped asking my opinion, stopped coming home for dinner, stopped pretending I mattered. And then, one night without drama, without yelling, he slid a folder across the kitchen counter and said, "I want a divorce. Let's keep this clean." Clean. That was the word he used while asking me to sign away everything. The settlement offer was insulting. No alimony. Limited custody. He claimed I was unemployed, unstable, incapable of giving Noah the life he deserved. He already had a new partner, a young consultant from his firm, and apparently she had a vision board that didn't include me. When I protested, when I said I'm his mother, he smiled the way people do when they think they're being generous. "Claire, don't make this hard. You can't fight me. My lawyer will destroy you." And I believed him, at least for a moment. Then something shifted. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. I closed the folder and said, "I'll see you in court." The trial started exactly how he expected. His attorney was sharp, charming, relentless. They painted me as a dependent nobody who had contributed nothing but laundry and excuses. They called witnesses who twisted everyday moments into character flaws. I let my kid watch cartoons. I looked tired at the grocery store. I didn't have a job title they respected. Every word landed like a small cut. My court-appointed lawyer looked unimpressive, quiet, almost bored. My ex smirked. His new girlfriend sat behind him, perfectly composed, already imagining herself as Noah's replacement mom. Then came the moment no one in that room was prepared for. When my lawyer stood and announced our first witness, the room barely paid attention. But when the doors at the back opened, the energy changed. An older man walked in, not rushed, not loud, but with the kind of presence that makes people sit up without knowing why. He was well-dressed, calm, steady. He looked at me and smiled the same smile I'd known my whole life. And suddenly the story they thought they understood cracked wide open. He introduced himself as my father. I'd taken my mother's last name when I was young. I'd kept my background quiet on purpose. Not as a test, not as a trick, but because I wanted a real life, real love, not someone impressed by access or wealth. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult my ex. He simply corrected the record. About support, about resources, about who I actually was. The courtroom went silent, then restless. My ex's lawyer froze mid-note. My ex looked at me like he was seeing a stranger for the first time. And then my brothers walked in. Two men who didn't need to say much. One handled international investments. The other handled legal disasters for people who thought they were untouchable. They didn't posture. They didn't threaten. They just existed, and that was enough. My ex leaned toward his lawyer, panic finally leaking through. I heard him whisper, "Who are these people?" The answer landed hard. "You didn't marry someone small," his lawyer said under his breath. "You married someone protected." What followed wasn't yelling or theatrics. It was methodical. Evidence presented calmly. Accounts uncovered. Transfers traced. Turns out my ex had been hiding money, moving it offshore, planning this divorce months in advance. My brother laid it out like a spreadsheet because that's what it was to him. Numbers, facts, consequences. My ex objected. The judge overruled. His girlfriend's smile disappeared. When his lawyer tried to pivot back to custody to paint me as unfit, my other brother stepped in. I wasn't unemployed. I'd been on sabbatical from the family business. That sabbatical ended that morning. Salary reinstated, board position restored, housing secured, stability proven. And then, as if that wasn't enough, a former housekeeper testified about the way my ex spoke to our son, about the pressure, the coldness. The recorded footage sealed it. You could hear his voice, sharp and dismissive, telling a 5-year-old to try harder instead of saying, "Good job." The courtroom felt different after that. He wasn't powerful anymore. He was exposed. The ruling came down like a door slamming shut. Full custody awarded to me. Supervised visitation only pending therapy and rehabilitation. Financial penalties for fraud. Restraining order. Everything he'd threatened to take from me vanished in a matter of minutes. He walked out alone. No cameras, no allies, no control. Months later, my life didn't turn into a fairy tale. It turned into something better. Calm, stable, honest. I rebuilt my confidence piece by piece. I laughed again. I slept again. My son stopped flinching when someone raised their voice. I stood at events not because I had to prove anything, but because I belonged there. Somewhere far away, my ex was starting over in a much smaller life, watching from the outside as the world moved on without him. Years later, I ran into someone who asked me if the punishment was too harsh, if maybe I'd gone too far. I thought about it for a long time, about how quietly I'd been shrinking to make someone else feel big, about how the system almost worked exactly the way it was designed to. And then I said this: consequences feel cruel only to the people who never expected them. Here's the thing. I didn't win because my family showed up. I won because I finally stopped believing the version of myself that someone else wrote for me. The rest was just gravity doing its job. So I want to ask you something. Was justice served here, or did power just shift hands? Have you ever watched someone be underestimated until the moment they stood up and everything changed? And if you were in my place, would you have stayed quiet for love, or spoken up sooner and risked everything? Let me know what you think in the comments, because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors. And sometimes we don't realize how strong we are until someone forces us to find out.